Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. Continuing on with Yatindramata Dipika by Srinivas, the light on Ramanuja's philosophy of Ramanuja's system. And we're at chapter 7, which is Dharma Adbhuta Jnana, which is attributive consciousness. So let's have a look at the text. So Dharma Adbhuta Jnana. Now the attributive consciousness, which comes next in sequence, is explained. So consciousness, right? It consists in being the subject, Vishayan. That is, the objects are manifested by it. While it is a self-luminous, unconscious substance, right? It's considered a substance. It is of the nature of substance attribute, dravya guna, right? Like light, while it is all pervasive. Consciousness is that which manifests the objects. These are characteristics of attributive consciousness. Attributive consciousness is always eternal and all pervasive in respect to Ishvara, or God, and the eternals, the nityas, right? So, for God, Srimanarayana, and for the eternally liberated jivatmans, called the eternals or nityas, attributive consciousness, their consciousness is eternal and it is all pervasive. So they have all pervasive consciousness. So not just God. God is, of course, all pervasive. His rupa, his swarupa, himself, he is totally all pervasive. The eternals, however, have consciousness, which is all pervasive. Their consciousness is all pervasive. Their knowledge, this Dharma Adbhuta Jnana, is a type of knowledge. It's a consciousness which is a type of knowledge, right? And that is also all pervasive for eternally liberated. Now, in the case of the bound selves, what we call nitya buddhas, or the jivatmans, the souls that are bound in this world and covered by illusion, right? It is obscured. That Dharma Adbhuta Jnana is obscured, right? It's not all pervasive, right? We can talk about it being contracted, or it can be covered. In the case of liberated ones would be, remember there are three types of souls. There's the ones that are eternally liberated, that have never had their Dharma Adbhuta Jnana contracted or covered, right? Never had their knowledge or consciousness being impaired in any way. And then there are the bound souls, which are completely impaired. They're impaired. Their consciousness is somewhat impaired. It's not all pervasive. And then there are the liberated ones, the bound souls that become liberated or attain liberation, right? And once they attain liberation, theirs is also manifest. So in the case of liberated souls, right, or liberated ones, it is obscured at first when they're bound, but manifests later. In other words, it expands and it becomes all pervasive, their consciousness. So if consciousness is eternal, right, the question is, if consciousness is eternal, how can there be an empirical usage, right? So how come sometimes people may say consciousness, there may be some statements, consciousness is born or consciousness is destroyed. If it's eternal, then how can we say consciousness is born and consciousness is destroyed? If this be asked, no. For the apparent appearance and disappearance of consciousness is possible by virtue of its state of contraction and expansion. So consciousness is never created, never destroyed, right? But it can be expanded and contracted. So in the bound state, it's contracted. In the liberated state, it's expanded unlimitedly. Just as water goes through the whole of a leather bag, I'm not sure if I understand exactly this analogy, but anyway, consciousness issues through the sense organs and contacts the objects. So we understand things through our senses. We already went through this in Pratyaksha. Empirical sense perception is done through the senses, right? It's the consciousness that reaches out through the senses to know something, to touch something, to taste something, to smell something, to hear something, to see something. Yeah? So contraction and expansion of consciousness are like the coiling up of a snake, right? So when you have a snake and it's coiled up, sometimes snakes, when they sleep, they wrap themselves up in coils and they just sit there like that. So maybe it's a 10-foot snake, but it only looks like it's 1 foot because it's all curled up. But then when it wakes up and expands, so this is the analogy given about consciousness expanding, contract. The snake's always there. The snake's always 10 feet, but it doesn't look 10 feet when it's all coiled up. Yeah, when it's contracted. So the consciousness of the living beings in this world is contracted. So it doesn't seem to be all expansive, but it actually is. It's contracted or it's covered in some way. All consciousness indeed is self-valid and self-luminous. That consciousness is self-luminous is inferred from the following manner. The consciousness, it is disputed with a reference to its own empirical usage, affects something independently because it is the cause of empirical usage independent of anything in its own class, like an object or a sense organ or light or light. Between sense of sight and light, there is no similarity of generic character, right? Sense of sight involves consciousness, whereas light is simply a dravya. It's just it's an element. For there is distinction between them because of the difference between as that of ahankara or ego, right, and of teja or teja is like shakti, so energy, right, fulgence. So that consciousness is momentary, that it endures for 3 moments, right? 3 moments would be past, present, future. That it is illusory is in empirical life, as in the phenomenal. That it has extrinsic validity, that consciousness itself is the self. These and similar views, other views, are refuted by this. Okay, so these are views which are refuted by Ramanuja's system, that consciousness is momentary, right, which is what the Buddhists say, that it endures for 3 moments, past, present, and future, but not forever, right, that it is illusory in empirical life, as in the phenomenal, right, it's not illusory, right, our consciousness, like Advaita says, that we see everything, we sense everything, but what we sense is actually an illusion. Brahma Satyam Jagat Nitya, that the only Brahman is true and the reality that we see is not true, right? Which is called Vaivartavad, right? Which is that there's a superimposition of, which is called Adhyasa. There's a superimposition of Maya of illusion on Brahman, and that's why we see difference. There's no real difference. Right, whereas the Vaishnavas, all the theistic schools believe in Parinamavad. Parinamavad means there is actual reality to the universe, right? Okay, so that it has extrinsic validity, right? Right, that consciousness itself is the self. Consciousness is separate from the self. These and similar views are refuted by this discussion. So the consciousness stream of cognition in the form of pillar, and so on is but one. Now, on the strength of scripture, if the eternality of consciousness is admitted, how can the difference of states like waking, sleep, right, etc., be accounted for, right? So we have these different states of consciousness. Yeah, if consciousness is eternal, then how do we talk about these different states of consciousness? Because we have waking, sleeping, we have deep sleep. So we have this, what's Jagrata, and it's called Swapna, which means dreaming, right? Sleep. And then Sushupti, which is deep, deep sort of sleep. When there's a pralaya and the universe is destroyed temporarily before it's recreated or something like that, the Atmans, the Jivatmans, the souls all enter into the body of the Lord, and I think we are in this form of Sushupti, which is a type of deep sleep. Okay, so how can those things be accounted for? If this be asked, no, just as fire, which can burn anything, loses its burning power owing to the obstruction of gem, etc. I'm not exactly sure of that analogy either. In the proximity of a thing to be burned. Similarly, owing to the presence or absence of a particular kind of tamas in this world, right? Tamas is the ignorance, is the mode of darkness, right? Which obscures consciousness. So tamas, right? A particular type of tamas, other people might call this maya, right? Sleep and other states are produced. And it is virility, etc. For virility, and it is like virility, etc. For virility and other powers are obscured in boyhood, but manifest themselves in youth. Okay, so when before puberty, people are not aware of certain things, and then when they attain puberty, they become more aware and they become more interested in adult sort of actions. Okay, so consciousness is of the nature of attribute because of the characterization of the definition as, quote, whatever by nature is dependent on something, that dependent thing is the attribute of the object on which it depends, like the attributes of a substance, right? So since consciousness possesses states like contraction and expansion, it becomes also a substance, right? Right, because only a substance can expand and contract, right? So it need not be doubted that so it's a consciousness is Dhamma Buddha Jnana, or this particular type of consciousness is, it's at once an attribute and at once also a substance, right? It need not be doubted that how consciousness, an attribute of the individual self, could become a substance. For like a light, there is no contradiction in the substance attribute nature of the same object, right? Substance is that which is the abode of states. Okay, so substances go through different states. The extension of consciousness beyond its substrate, right, its underlying substrate, is possible like light, right? So for instance, if we have light, think about consciousness like light. So you have a candle, let's say, and if you put a covering around that candle, the light is obscured. You can't see the light. So you put a cover around it and you can't see it. When you take the cover off, you can see it, right? The syllogism may be made like this. Attributive consciousness is a substance because it possesses the attributes of diffusion, etc., like a luminous substance. And further, consciousness is a substance because it is the cause of cognition or bhavana. Being different from the conjunction and the unseen effect, adrisya. Unseen effect means adrisya. Adrisya means to see, adrisya means what is unseen, an unseen effect, like an individual self. The consciousness of the liberated can simultaneously contact infinite numbers of bodies, like rays issuing from the eye, sun, etc. So the consciousness of the liberated, which is all pervasive, and God, of course, is included in this, as we said, can simultaneously contact infinite numbers of bodies like rays issuing from the eye and the sun. So the liberated, their consciousness can perceive any number of bodies. Right now, we have consciousness of one body. We have consciousness of this body. We do not have consciousness of other people's bodies, in the sense that we don't feel what they feel through their senses. But when we're liberated, we can understand what everybody is feeling and multiple bodies. So terms such as jnana, mati, pragya, samvit, dishana, di, manisha, shemushi, meda, buddhi, and others are synonyms of consciousness. Buddhi, of course, there's a few of jnana. All these things are synonyms. Consciousness itself, owing to the difference of the limiting adjunct, takes the form of happiness, sorrow, desire, hate, endeavor, etc. Right? So, for instance, we feel unhappy when unhappiness is only due to ignorance. Sorrow is only due. These things are all, these desire, hate, and these things are all only due to ignorance. Once we know everything, there's no ignorance anymore. There is no evidence for the assumption of consciousness as distinct from and as a cause for generating happiness. There's no evidence for the assumption of consciousness as distinct from and as a cause for generating happiness, etc. These different things here. Happiness, sorrow, desire. This is material. It talks mainly material happiness. We're not talking about spiritual happiness. The empirical usage, I desire, I hate, etc., is accounted as an attribute of consciousness, like I remember, which is also a different form of consciousness. Now, it has been stated that desire, resolve, doubt, faith, want of faith, firmness, want of firmness, modesty, intelligence, fear, and all these are but the mind. Right? So some people say, if they are such, how could they be of the nature of consciousness? It just be asked, no, since mind, according to an invariable principle, is the associate of consciousness. It was figuratively said that the mind was all. Hence, there is no contradiction in this. Similarly, perception, inference, verbal testimony, which we just talked about, pratyakshana shabda, recollection, doubt, misapprehension, error, discrimination, effort, infatuation, attachment, hate, and inebriety, right? Envy, courage, fickleness, arrogance, covetousness, anger, pride, stupefaction, treachery, persistence, disgust, joy, etc., and good state of mind, bad state of mind, affection, contentment, exaltation, peace, non-attachment, enjoyment, friendship, compassion, desire for liberation, modesty, forbearance, inquiry, desire for victory, delight, forgiveness, desire to act, aversion, right? Aversion to act, right? Reminiscent, impression, hypocrisy, detraction of the qualities of others, desire to kill, inordinate hankering, cupidity, past impression, discussion, faith, devotion to God, self-surrender to God, etc., are attributes of the individual self, which are innumerable. So the individual self has all these attributes. They are but particular modes of the attributive consciousness. Likewise, knowledge, power, strength, splendor, prowess, luster, excellence of disposition, love, softness, straightforwardness, friendliness, equality, compassion, sweetness, profundity, generosity, cleverness, steadiness, firmness, heroism, valor, and others are the infinite auspicious attributes of Bhagavan, of the Supreme Lord, Sriman Narayana. Right? Part of his Ananta Kalyana Gunas, his infinite auspicious qualities. They are the expansion of his knowledge and power. Of these, what is called knowledge is of the nature of universal realization. Power is the capacity to accomplish what cannot be accomplished. Strength is the capacity to bear. Right? Splendor is the capacity to rule. Prowess is immutability. Luster is the power to vanquish others. Excellence of disposition is the natural tendency of the high to contact the low without any difference. Love is the disposition to see virtue in spite of the existence of fault. These are all giving definitions of these qualities. Or not finding fault at all. Softness is the inability to endure the separation of one's own dependence. Straightforwardness is oneness of thought, word, and deed. Friendliness is readiness to save them. That is your dependence, right? Those who are dependent upon you. Even ignoring one's own existence. Equality means to become the refuge of all, irrespective of birth, right? Irrespective of birth, meaning irrespective of caste or gender or these different things. Equality, just like we have in the Bhagavad Gita, Pandita Samadarshanaha, right? Sunicheva Swapakichas, Pandita Samadarshanaha, Pandit sees equally. So equality or samatvam, right, means to become the refuge of all, irrespective of birth, knowledge, whether you know a lot or you don't know a lot, behavior, qualities, etc. That's quality. Compassion is the desire to alleviate the suffering of others without self-interest, or the incapacity to bear the suffering of others. And the Supreme Lord shows that all the time. He has compassion on all the living beings, right? He finds it unbearable that he feels for us, and that's why he saves us. Sweetness is to be dainty without any condition, like milk, right? So milk, even if milk isn't, even if you don't add sugar to milk, milk is considered to be a sweet product by itself. Profundity, it has essential sweetness. So sweetness is an inherent quality. Profundity means the impossibility to thoroughly measure the depth of God's favor, munificence, etc., towards his devotees. So that is really profound, right? Generosity is a sense of dissatisfaction even after conferring in abundance. That's what generosity means. Generosity means even after you gave in abundance, you've given in abundance, you still feel dissatisfied. That means you're a generous person. Cleverness consists in hiding the faults of a person who have taken refuge. So the Supreme Lord is so clever, and Mahalakshmi also is clever to hide the faults of people who have taken refuge, right? Steadiness is non-agitation. Firmness is the absence of vacillation over solemn declaration. Right? You make a solemn promise and you're firm on it. That is called that is firmness. Yeah, you don't waver. Heroism is the capacity to penetrate into the heart of the army. Right? Heroism. Right? It's being spoken of here in terms of battle, but it can be expressed in other ways too. The destruction of that army is valor. So a hero doesn't necessarily win the war, but he can penetrate those who oppose, right? But he has real valor if he can defeat the other army. Likewise, other attributes have to be inferred. The essential nature of bhakti and prapatti, which are particular modes of consciousness, will now be briefly explained or told. Ishvara, or God, Sriman Narayana, alone grants release from bondage, right? He alone grants liberation when he is propitiated by bhakti and prapatti, right? So there needs to be some propitiation by the souls. Hence, these two alone are the means for the attainment of release. So, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, these things they're nice, but we actually have to propitiate the Lord through Bhakti Yoga or through Prapatti, like that, in order for him to grant us release or liberation. Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and other yogas, which are said to be the means for liberation, are the means to moksha through the medium of bhakti alone. So there's a Bhakti Mahatmya also, which mentions that that Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga are they're also like the two wings of a bird. They're helping. They help bhakti they help bhakti to fructify, to manifest. What is called Karma Yoga is a special kind of activity which a person possessing true knowledge of the individual self and the highest, meaning Sriman Narayana, received from the instructions of the preceptor, right? Performs according to his capacity. It is non-prohibited action without any regard for the fruits and is in the shape of kamya, nitya, and naimitika actions. Okay, so that's Karma Yoga. So the reason why he says here non-prohibited action is because certain aspects of Karma Yoga could be prohibited to you because of your caste or because of your gender or because of your situation in society in some way, or there might be some other reasons why you cannot perform certain acts in Karma Yoga. Okay, but these, of course, will be explained by the preceptor. It is divided into worship of God, penance, pilgrimage, sacrifice, charity, sacrifice, etc. So these nitya, what does it say? Kamya, kamya meaning with a desire, actions with a desire. Nitya meaning daily actions or eternal actions, which are done daily. And naimitika, which means from time to time at different timings, right? Not all the time and not every day, right? Actions. These are the three types of actions that we usually talk about. Kamya, nitya, naimitika, and kamya. That's usually how it's said. Okay, so it is divided into worship of God, penance, pilgrimage, charity, and sacrifice, etc. This, by destroying the impurities of the individual self, generates Jnana Yoga, right? By destroying the impurities in the individual self, the Karma Yoga generates Jnana Yoga. And through it or directly becomes the producer of bhakti. So Karma Yoga itself can lead to bhakti, or Karma Yoga can lead to Jnana Yoga, which leads to bhakti. What is called Jnana Yoga is a special kind of meditation on the real nature of one's own self as distinct from prakriti or material nature, right? So if there's a real understanding of what the soul is or what the jivatman is, right? And there's meditation on that, right? The scriptures will explain how to do that. So by studying the scriptures, we understand that. And as existing for the purpose of it, Ishvara. So, okay, there are two things about the soul, two main things about the soul. Number one is distinct from Prakriti. That's described in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Aparayam itastvanyam, Prakritim vidime param jiva bhuga mahabaho yayitam daryachegi jagat. In the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, first of all, says that he says all the different material elements of Prakriti. Then he says there's another thing apart from Prakriti, there's the soul, and the soul is higher than that, is different from that. So first of all, to understand the distinction, the first thing is to understand the distinction, and we're going to come to the next chapter is going to be about the jiva, about the individual souls. So this is a prelude to that. So he's saying that the real nature of the soul, he's talking about the definition of Jnana Yoga, the real nature of the soul is, first of all, number one, distinct from matter. So the first thing we have to understand is the soul is different from matter. It's not matter. It's not material nature. It's not prakriti, right? And as existing for the purpose of Ishvara, right? In fact, that's the more important thing to understand, is that actually everything is for the purpose of the Lord. Everything is for the purpose of Sriman Narayana. He creates everything for his purpose. And therefore the soul is also for the purpose of Sriman Narayana, for his service, right? After having attained purity of mind by the discipline of Karma Yoga. So the purity of mind comes by performing the actions of Karma Yoga. And then when one has a pure mind, then one can concentrate on this meditation. And the meditation in Jnana Yoga is on the soul is on the soul, on the nature of the soul. It's a meditation on the nature of soul. So Jnana Yoga is the meditation on the nature of the soul, and as distinct from material nature, prakriti, and that the soul is is meant for the purpose of serving Sriman Narayana, Ishvara, God. Okay. Therefore, in Jnana Yoga also there has to be some explanation of God, because this second thing here is we have to understand that the soul is for the purpose of God. This is useful for the direct realization of bhakti, right? Likewise, the manner in which other means also are useful for generating bhakti may be understood. So there may be some other minor means which are also good for generating bhakti. What is called, now he's going to explain bhakti yoga. What is called bhakti yoga is the continuous stream of remembrance of God, uninterrupted like a flow of oil. And this comes from the example given by Ramanuja himself, that when we take some oil and pour it from one container to another, it appears to be a solid stream with no break. So that is called in the yoga scriptures samadhi or dhyana, uninterrupted meditation on God, like that, is bhakti yoga, and is characterized by the eightfold limbs. So this is actually nothing but Astanga yoga. Astanga yoga means to link with God, and Astanga means that there are these 8 different parts to that. So yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So in bhakti yoga is generated by the 7-fold discipline of viveka, vimoka, abhyasa, kriya, kalyana, anavasada, and anudarsha. Of these, what is called, he's going to explain, what is called viveka is discrimination. Discrimination is the purification of the body by food that has not become impure either on account of species, right, or abode, or adventitious cause, right? So there are these ways that food can become impure. So we categorize the food of different beings, right? Whether it's pure or impure. So we don't need to go into that. We pretty much understand what is pure food and what is not pure food. But if we want to go into it in great detail, we can, like that. So discrimination has to do with the purification of the body by accepting only what is pure and rejecting what is impure. Vimoka, or mental detachment, consists of non-attachment to desires, right? So when desires arise, when one can be not attached to them, that is called mental detachment, or vimoka. Abhyasa, or practice, is the continuous meditation on the perfect object, Kriya, actions, means the performance of the 5 great sacrifices according to one's capacity. The 5 great sacrifices are the Pancha Mahayajna, right? So they involve, they're mostly done by Traivarnikas and by male Traivarnikas, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, okay? And they have to do with performing actions to get rid of the debts that we incur by just taking birth in this material world. We have debts to the rishis, we have debts to the human beings like our parents, we have debts to other living beings, and we have these different debts. Okay, so the 5 great sacrifices are for that. Kalyanas, or virtues, are such as truthfulness, straightforwardness, compassion, liberality, non-violence, non-covetousness. Right? I think that's pretty clear. These are virtues. Anavasada, or cheerfulness, is freedom from dejection. So sometimes people may have all of these nice qualities, but they feel dejected, such as in the case of Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He felt dejected even though he had so many good qualities, because he felt that there was this load of sin on him from unlimited lifetimes in this material world. But there should be cheerfulness also. Cheerfulness means freedom from that dejection. So anudarsha, or non-exaltation. So at the same time, one may be cheerful, one may be happy, that one is taken to the spiritual path, one is performed property, one is doing bhakti yoga even, right? And one is serving the Lord. But at the same time, non-exaltation means not over happiness, not too happy, like that. So one has to be stoic and has to be one has to be very tempered in his happiness. The meaning is that over-exaltation is opposed to meditation, right? Happy, happy, happy people like that, and their mind is agitated, and therefore, because they're so passionate, right? It's difficult for them to have this firm meditation, right? Just like this pouring of oil, right? If you try to pour it too quickly, right, it disturbs the stream, right? So there should be a slow stream that's unbroken. That's the consciousness should be like that, right? So this is non-exaltation. Okay, so those terms were described and defined. Then bhakti favored by the sevenfold discipline, this sevenfold discipline attains the likeness of direct intuition, right? Direct intuition would be sakshatkara, seeing God right directly in front of you, or perceiving him, direct perception of the Supreme, or of the soul even. It has final realization as its limit, right? So this sakshatkara it will be the final realization, when the material body falls, right? And one goes to Vaikuntha, and one has that sakshatkara. It has that what is stated in the Vedas as pasyanti surayaha. The surayaha, those persons who are the liberated, the muktas and the nityas, right? They pasyanti, they directly see sakshatkara of the Supreme. This final realization may take place at the end of the present body, or at the end of some other body, right? So in the case of property, in the case of doing property, right? Then at the end of this very body, this present body, at the end of this lifetime, one will have that sakshatkara, one will have that direct perception of the Supreme in Sri Vaikuntha. Or if one performs bhakti yoga, right, which is the other process, then it may come at the end of some body, not necessarily the end of this life, but some other life, right, when one becomes perfected, right? Bhakti, denoted by such terms as Vedana, Dhyana, Upasana, etc., right? Dhyana means meditation, Upasana means worship, etc., transforms itself into successive forms, right? So there are these different forms which are being explained here, right? Forms of bhakti. There's para bhakti. Para means like supreme, right? Para bhakti, that's one level. The next level, the higher level, and this is bhakti. We're talking about bhakti here. Bhakti means devotion, right? So para bhakti is supreme devotion. There's paragyana, which is higher than para bhakti. And then there's what is called parama bhakti, the most supreme devotion. It has property or self-surrender as a limb. Property or self-surrender as a limb. I'm not exactly quite sure what he means by that, but it's probably going to be expanded here. It is of two kinds because of the differences between sadhana bhakti and phala bhakti. So this we can equate this with in the Gaudiya Vaishnava system. They say that there is Vaidhi bhakti with rules and regulations, and Raganuga bhakti, spontaneous devotion. So here that is called phala bhakti. So sadhana bhakti, engendered by spiritual exercises, meaning practice, spiritual practice, right? And phala bhakti, spontaneous devotion. Sadhana bhakti is generated by the aforesaid means. So we already talked about those 7 means, right? Phala bhakti, as found in Sri Parankusha. Parankusha means Namalwar, right? Namalwar. Nata meaning here Nata Muni. So we have in the Alwars, Phala bhakti, Phala Bhakti, or, we could call it, in Gaudiya terms, we call it Raganuga Bhakti, as found in Nam Alwar, Nathamuni. So great Alwars, the Alwars and the Acharyas have this Phala Bhakti, right? Right? Is engendered by the grace of Ishvara, is engendered by the grace of Ishvara. The use of the term bhakti in expressions such as the love of those who are devoted to me, etc., and in praises and salutations is figurative, right? So the term bhakti in other expressions, right, is figurative. In these praises and salutations is figurative. Now, when the Vedanta texts have laid down hearing and reflection as a means to salvation or moksha, how is meditation alone enjoined? Right? If this be asked, it is said in reply, a person who has studied the Veda with its limbs, right, the Vedas and Vedangas, right, finds that it contains instruction regarding activities subserving particular purposes. And in order to ascertain it, he applies himself to hearing. Since hearing is thus established, it becomes the anuvada, right? That is, reference to what is already mentioned or known, right? So after hearing, then remembering, right? Likewise, reflection is also an anuvada. Reflection is a type of going over in your memory something, right? Remembrance. Since it confirms what one has heard, right? So if you want to confirm what you've heard or studied, right, you go over it again and again and again, even in your mind, and that confirms it. What confirms what you've understood. Therefore, all the Vedanta texts enjoin meditation only. Thus, there is no contradiction. There is no contradiction between these two statements in the Vedanta. Bhakti, denoted by the term meditation, is manifold because of the difference of vidyas, i.e., different forms of meditation. Okay, so in the Vedanta, in the Vedas and the Upanishads, there are what we call 32, some people say 33, I think Shankar says 33, but anyway, 32 Upanishadic vidyas. These vidyas are forms of meditation. So Gayatri Upasana is one of them. Doing Gayatri meditation, that is one of them. Like that property is called Nyasa Vidya. It's a type of Vidya. Property is a type of Vidya. So that's probably why he says it's a limb. Okay, so, and these vidyas or forms of meditation are of two kinds. Those that are the means for the attainment of ephemeral fruits and those which are useful for the attainment of liberation. So now he's going to talk about different types of processes. And he's saying that there are also other, these 32 Upanishadic vidyas to be clear, are for the attainment of Brahman, the understanding of the Supreme Sriman Narayana, and attainment of liberation. Here he says there are two types of vidyas. There are also these processes which are meant for ephemeral fruits, which are meant for just ordinary fruits, getting some fruit in this material world. Of these, Udgitya Vidya and others are meant for the attainment of ephemeral fruits. So we have to look up that and we have to see exactly what that type of vidya is. The Brahma Vidyas. Now, when somebody says to you Brahma Vidyas, that means the spiritual processes of meditation, such as Antarakshi Vidya, Dahara Vidya, Bhuma Vidya, Sadvidya, Madhu Vidya, Upakoshala Vidya, Shandilya Vidya, Purusha Vidya, Vaishvanara Vidya, right? Panchagni Vidya, etc., are means for the attainment of liberation. So these are all different means for the attainment of liberation. These are all different types of meditation that one can perform, which are mentioned in the Upanishads. Nyasa Vidya is self-surrender. So we get that. So that property is otherwise called Nyasa Vidya. It's one of the Upanishadic vidyas. So when people say that property is not to be found in the scriptures, yes, it is. It's there in the Upanishads very clearly. What is called property is to conceive what is in conformity with the will of Ishvara, right? Property simply means to understand what is and conform to the will of Ishvara, to reject what is disagreeable to Ishvara, right? So now we have this Anukulyasya Sankalpa, Pratikulyasya Varjana. This is this quotation which comes from Lakshmi Tantra about the definition of the angas of property, the angas of surrender, Sharanagati, right? So we have so here he's giving this definition to conceive of what is in conformity with the will of Ishvara, to reject what is disagreeable to Ishvara, to the Supreme Lord, Sriman Narayana, to have firm faith as he will save me, to have this firm faith that he will save me, to seek him alone as protector and no one else, right? To surrender oneself to him in all meekness. Thus it is called five constituents. It has these five constituents, right? Nyasa, denoted by Sharanagati, right? This Nyasa Vidya, right? Nyasa means to place. What does it mean? It means placing ourselves at the feet of the Lord, surrender, right? Nyasa Vidya. Nyasa, denoted by Sharanagati and other terms, is that particular state of consciousness which grants liberation at the finis or the end of this body, right? This particular birth, and which is to be performed but once. To be performed but once, is only done once. So that is a definition of what nyasa or property is. This doctrine of property has to be known from the mouth of the preceptor. And esoteric works in the traditional manner. Hence, this theme of discourse is closed without further elucidation, as this book is written for the enlightenment of beginners. So what he says is, he says right here, he says, okay, so Nyasa Vidya is property, is Sharanagati. He's explained that there are five as constituents of it, five angas, right? He's given the sloka for it. But then he said, okay, you have to learn it from a guru, and you have to study the esoteric works, right, in a traditional manner. That's what he says. Then he says, I'm not going to say any more about it because you need to go to a guru and you need to study these esoteric works about it. And therefore, this book is only for beginners. This book is not for those persons who are eligible for that. You have to become eligible and you have to do that. So since bhakti and property alone have been admitted as means of liberation, the means enunciated by others are rejected. So he's given the definition of the different means to liberation. He's explained also what karma yoga and jnana yoga were. And he also explained what bhakti yoga and property are. Then he said, okay, very clearly, other means to liberation are out. They're rejected. For instance, among those who are beyond the pale of the Vedas, right? People who reject the Vedas, called Nastikas, right? Not Astikas. Astikas means we accept the Vedas. Nastika means they don't accept the Vedas. So those who are beyond the pale of the Vedas, since some do not admit any self different from the body. So those persons who do not believe in the soul, they just believe in the body, right? In matter. There is no volitional disposition for release in their system. There is no way for liberation in their system. All there is death and burning the body and everything's finished, right? That is called Charvaka. That is the Charvaka system or the Indian atheistic system, right? And it applies to other atheistic systems too. How can there be the exercise of will for release in the system of others who admit the momentariness of consciousness, which itself constitutes the self? Okay, so the Buddhists are taught, it's called Shana Vada. Shana means they believe that consciousness only exists momentarily, and the next moment it's a different consciousness. It's different. So the consciousness or the soul changes from moment to moment, and therefore they believe that reality only exists for a moment. Everything is here and now. And then again, everything is different in the next here and now. So, okay, so those people, right? It says, how can the exercise of will for release in the system of others who admit momentariness, right, of consciousness, which itself constitutes the self? They think, because they think everything is momentary, right? They have this idea. If it be said that release be posited by the succession of consciousness, no. For one that has perished cannot exert over another to bring about release. So it's foolish, the Buddhists and people who are Chanavadis, who believe in this momentariness of consciousness and a self is momentary, right? If they talk about liberation, if they talk about even if they talk about their type of liberation, they call nirvana, which extinguishing. But if they talk about liberation, how can they talk about liberation? Because the thing which is being liberated has no, the thing doesn't have any continuity. The soul, according to them, the consciousness has no continuity. Continuity of consciousness is the soul. If there's no continuity, there's no soul, right? If there's no soul in the sense that we understand soul, like so, if they have an understanding of the self as being the non-continuous, right, momentary, right, then how can one momentary soul or self exert any influence over the next one? That's the point he's making. If it be said that that release may be posited by the succession of consciousness, no. For one that has perished cannot exert over another to bring about release, right? Hence, there cannot be the volitional inclination for release, right? If there is no way for release, then how can there be people cannot be doing something to be released, nor can there be volitional disposition for release in the system of another, since dharma and adharma become variable owing to the method of the 7 paralogisms. I don't know what that means. Okay, so we'll have to look that up. Nor can there be any volitional exercise for liberation in the case of the Vaisheshikas. So he goes through all of these different, he's talking about, not only is he talking about the Nastikas, those who don't believe in the Vedas, but now he's talking about the different schools of thought, the basic schools of thought, and this will be somewhat unintelligible to people who have not understood the six main schools of Indian thought, which are Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Samkhya, and Purva and Uttara Mimamsa. Okay, so the Vaisheshikas, whose conception of release is nothing but petrifaction. Okay. In the system of the Sankhyas, right, there's a type of Sankhya which is Nirishvara Sankhya, which there's different types of Sankhya. In Sankhya is basically counting, enumeration of different elements and things. We went through the process of creation. That also comes from the Sankhya system. But the Sankhya system can believe in God and not believe in God, right? So there is a type of Sankhya which doesn't believe in God. So in the system of Sankhya, since they do not admit Ishvara, they do not admit the Supreme Lord, Srimanarayana, there is doubt as to who attains release, whether the individual self or the Prakriti. Hence, there is not the disposition for release. In the case of the Mayans, right, those who are Mayavadis, those who speak of Maya, right, the Advaitins, right, since the real non-dual knowledge cannot arise, from the empirical statements, i.e. scriptural texts, there is not the disposition for release, right? So we're saying it's absolutely crazy that you have these people who are Advaitins, believe that everything is non-dual, right? Everything is one, right? And yet they say that by meditation on the scriptural texts of the Vedas, like Tattvamasi, right, etc., right? They have these scriptural sentences, right, which are supposed to explain reality, non-dual knowledge. That non-dual knowledge cannot arise from empirical sentences, right? These sentences are empirical. They're made of words and letters, right? Syllables, and they're written on pages of scriptural texts, right? Which they don't believe exists, which they think is an illusion. So how how can their non-dual knowledge come, their knowledge of unity come from something which is duality? That's crazy, right? But they don't see it like that. So anyway, the doctrine of jnana, right, meaning knowledge, kum means and, jnana and karma, right, action, of Bhaskara and Yadava is refuted by what has been said. So what he's saying here is he's lumping in Bhaskaracharya, and Yadava Prakash, who was the original Gurukul teacher of Ramanuja, with these Mayavadins or Advaitins, right? Because they were propounders. Bhaskara and Yadava were propounders of different types of Veda Vad, right? That is also, it's their systems are also considered to be like the Mayavad, like the Advaita. So these refuted by what has been said. The system of the Shaivas. Now we're coming to the system of the Shaivas. Right, and all of these things will be gone through in more detail. If we go through Indian philosophical systems, all these different schools, we can understand what they teach and why it's so wrong. The Shaivas, the system of the Shaivas is also rejected owing to the appearance of Pashupati at the end, as the end to be attained, smearing of ashes, etc., opposed to the Vedas as the means. So the appearance of Pasupati. First of all, Pashupati here in the system of the Shaivas is Shiva. And Shiva is a Manasika Putra, is a mental son of Brahma, right? So owing to the appearance of Shiva, owing to the fact that Shiva is a jiva, is a jivatman, he's not the supreme. His father is Brahma, like that. So owing to his appearance, and also to the fact that they do all these other crazy things like smearing themselves with ashes, which are completely opposed in the Vedas, right, as means. So because of their actions and because of their faith in a person being God who isn't actually God, right? Therefore, the Shaiva school is also rejected. Thus, attributive consciousness has been explained. Here ends the seventh avatar of Dharma Buddhikyana of Yatindramata Dipika, composed by Srinivasa, the foremost disciples of Sriman Mahacharya, an ornament in the line of the Vadulas. Chapter 8, Avatar 8, is about the jiva, the soul, the jivatman, the living being, the individual living being. Now the individual self is explained. The common characteristics of the individual self and Ishvara are self-consciousness, right? So these are common things between the soul and God, between Ishvara, Sriman Narayana, and the self, right? So there are some commonalities, and then there are some differences, and we'll understand the differences more when we go into Ishvara, when we understand about Sriman Narayana in the next chapter. I think it's the next chapter, I'm not sure. So the common characteristics of the individual self and Ishvara: self-consciousness, sentiency, being sentient, right? Selfhood, agency, etc. Right? So the soul is an agent, right? What is called an agent means a doer, right? Something. So what is called self-consciousness is to illumine oneself for oneself. Right? In Descartes, in Western terms, Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. Right? So the ability to think and to think about oneself, right? That is a sign of being the individual self, right? And God can also do that. Sriman Narayana. Sentiency consists of being the locus of consciousness, being the place where the locality of consciousness. Selfhood consists of having invariable relation with the body, right? The body and the self have a relationship that is called sharira, shariri, bhava, right? That is the analogy that Ramanuja talks about. God has the relationship. See, we have a relationship with the body right now, right? And God also has a relationship with the body, which is everything, is his body. Agency, so these things are in common with God. Agency consists in being the locus or the locality or the place of volitional consciousness. So when we want to do something, when we have the consciousness of willing, right? We say thinking, feeling, willing. Willing means actually going and doing something. The special characteristics of the individual self, whose general attributes have been pointed out. So there are special characteristics of the individual self. These may be different from Trimanarayana, right? Have been pointed out in the above manner, are now set forth as follows. While it is monadic, it is sentient, right? Monadic means it's tiny, it's infinitesimal, and it's separate, right? It is sentient, it has consciousness. While it is subsidiary by nature to Brahman or to Ishvara, right? The principle, the supreme, right? It is sentient, even though it's subsidiary, even though it's monadic, even though it's small and it's separate, and even though it's dependent on the supreme, right? It's still sentient. Likewise, the qualities of being supported, controlled, dependency, subserviency have been inferred, right? So because of these two aspects here, it's also understood that the soul is supported by God, is controlled by God, is dependent upon God, is subservient to God. So these are all inferred aspects. In the jiva, the jiva is different from the body, the sense organs, mind, vital breath, etc. Right? So we discussed those things in Prakriti, in the section on Prakriti, the chapter on Prakriti. It is different from the body as seen in the perception, this is my body. So when people say, this is my body, it means, okay, so who are you then? Who is the owner of the body? It is distinct from the external sense organs on the account of perception. I see with eyes, right? I see with eyes. Who is the eye that sees through the eyes? Hear with ears. Who is the eye that hears through the ears? Speak with the organ of speech. Who is the eye that speaks through the tongue and the organs of speech, etc.? It is distinct from the mind, the vital breath, right? The prana, the consciousness, on account of our perception of the mind being the instrument of consciousness, as I know by my mind, I know by mind, on account of the distinguishing expression as my vital breath. And because of the consciousness, I know, right? Who is the I that knows, right? It is separate from the knowing. It is monadic in size, since scripture declares its passing out, etc., and also because passing out from the body, right? Scripture declares that the soul leaves the body, it passes from one body to another, right? Goes from different right? The intelligent person can understand that, right? Also because it is in accordance with the sources of knowledge, right? So not only do we know that it's monadic or it's infinitesimal and it's separate, because scripture tells us, and also because we understand it through other sources of knowledge, which we've just discussed about, the way we perceive it. So, nor may it be doubted that how the individual self can simultaneously experience many objects if it were monadic, right? So we shouldn't doubt that it can experience all these things, even though it's very tiny and separate. For it is possible by the pervasiveness of attributive consciousness, which the last chapter was about, because of the all-pervasive nature of, or even the limited pervasive nature of attributive consciousness in the bound situation, but in the liberated situation, the all-pervasiveness of attributive consciousness. It's possible for him to experience all these different objects. By this, the simultaneous assumption of many bodies by Sholbari, there was a Sholbari, and the liberated selves is possible. Okay, so the liberated selves, the jivas, who are nityas, and muktas, those who are never had their consciousness obscured, never were here in this material world, and those who attained liberation, they have all got the ability to their consciousness to unlimitedly expand and understand what's going on in everybody, right? This Sholbury Rishi, there's a story about this particular Rishi. He was meditating under the sea, and he saw some fish, and he decided to leave his meditation and go and have a family and everything like that. And he was able to manifest several bodies, and he had pervasive consciousness of those particular bodies, right? So more than one. So it is possible, even in this material world, for that to happen, but it's limited. It's limited. Whereas in liberation, the muktas and the nityas, it's all pervasive. It's not limited. It is eternal, right? The soul is eternal, for it recollects the objects experienced in the past. If the jiva, is eternal, how can it experience that the individual soul is born, right? Sometimes individual self is born, and that the individual self is destroyed, be accounted for. We discussed this also with consciousness. How can it be discussed that consciousness is born and destroyed? So here we're talking about the jiva, the actual soul, right? How can it, we have this idea that the individual self is born, the individual self is destroyed. How can that be accounted for? If it be asked, no, for it is established that what is called birth, right, is the individual self's connection with the body, with a particular body. So birth is simply the connection of this jiva, this Atman, with a particular body, right? So when we say the jiva is born, we just mean he comes in contact and is associated with and pervades a particular body. That's birth. And the destruction is the severance from it. Severance of the relationship, of the pervasive relationship between the jivatman and the particular body. That's death, right? But that's not the real. That's not the soul being born or soul being destroyed. We know that from Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita talks about the soul is never destroyed, the soul is never created, right? It's eternal. The essential nature of the individual soul is indeed eternal, right? We know this. So it is different in each body, just as there is a usage of the expression one jar. When there are many gold jars of a similar size, one grain, when there is a heap of grains, so there is a usage of a single number with reference to many individual selves on account of the oneness of consciousness, right? So because all selves have consciousness, right? We sometimes talk about a group, and we say one jar when we mean many jars, and we say one grain when we mean a lot of grains, many grains. But not they are identical in their essential, they are identical in their essential nature, since it contradicts evidence, right? In their essential nature, they're identical. It is blissful by nature. The empirical existence of birth and death is due to the force of limiting adjuncts. It becomes the agent, the enjoyer, the embodied self, and the body. It is the embodied self viewed in relation to primordial matter, the physical body. It is the body for the sake of Ishvara, right? So it is the soul is the embodied self in relation, when you relate it to matter, it's the embodied self, right? It is the body of Ishvara. It is the body of the soul. The soul in this world is also the body of God, right? Its luminosity is established by the evidence of perception and scripture. The syllogism is as follows: the individual self is self-luminous because it is consciousness, like the attributive consciousness. The quality of being conscious, monadness, stainlessness, etc., are the attributes which determine its essential nature. By this definition of the individual soul, the following antitheses, right, are refuted, right? So the Buddhists have these theses. right? The different people have these theses. Okay, so the theses of the Buddhists that the individual self is a succession of moments, we talked about this, since consciousness is momentary, right? These are all refuted by what we've just said. The views of the Charvakas that this body is composed of the four elements, that the soul is just the body, right? That since the body is composed of the four elements, the individual self is coextensive with the body. So they say the self is nothing but the body, right? The opinion of the Jains, like the Jainas have the idea that the individual self is the same size as that of the body, that the soul is the same size as the body somehow, right? Since it assumes that the size of an elephant is of the elephant in the elephant body, and the size of the ant in the ant body, in its body. The argument of the Sankhya's, right? And now I'm talking about Nirishvara Sankhya's, who don't believe in God, that the agency, enjoyment, etc., belong to Prakriti and not to the individual self. That the enjoyment and the doership is due to material nature and not to the self, right? The standpoint of Yadava Prakash, right, that the individual self is a portion of Brahman, right? The thesis of Bhaskara that the individual self is a division of the conditioned Brahman. Conditioned Brahman, this is spirit, which is conditioned, right? The supreme somehow or other is divided up according to Yadava Prakash. According to Bhaskara, there's another type of division, right, of the supreme self, and that's the individual self. These are all refuted. The single self thesis that the individual self is the fabrication of avidya, that's Shankara's idea. Shankara says because of ignorance, we feel that this one self, everything is one self. And because we're in ignorance, we think that there's more, that there's more than one self. The multi-self view that the individual self is the internal organ, limited consciousness, etc. So we think that we're the mind, right? If we think that we're the mind or the ego or the intelligence, no. Likewise, the school which upholds the all-pervasiveness of the individual self is refuted. So there's a school also that believes that the individual self can be all-pervasive, right? Completely all-pervasive, not just all-pervasive consciousness, but actually totally all-pervasive like God, right? That is also refuted. Right. Now, if the all-pervasiveness of the self is not admitted, how in other regions the acquisition of fruits engendered by adrishya, unseen effects of karma, is possible, right? So if we say that the self is not all-pervasive, right, which we do say, right, the acquisition, how do we get different fruits, good and bad, from the papas and punyas that we haven't seen, right? In this, if this be asked, no, for though there is an absence of the relation of the individual self with other regions where it is absent, the acquisition of fruits is possible by the power of adrista only. It's unseen. What is called adrista is a special kind of consciousness generated by a particular kind of action performed by the individual self, and what produces love or dislike on the part of Bhagavan. This special kind of consciousness is verily the will of Bhagavan, right? Sriman Narayana Satya Sankalpa, and depends upon him whose essential nature is all pervasiveness. Therefore, the acquisition of fruits is certainly possible for the individual self. Thus, there is no contradiction, right? So we don't see the workings of karma, but karma is according to the will of the Lord. According to the will of the Lord, we'll get a reaction, good or bad, for what we've done in previous births, even though it is adrisya, we don't see it. We don't see it. We're not aware of it because our consciousness is covered or contracted. This jiva is of three kinds, right? The bound, the freed, and the eternal, which is called the Buddha jiva, right? The Nitya Samsaran, the one who is here in this material world, the freed, the Mukta, who is liberated, who was bound and became freed, and the one who was never bound, the Nitya, or the Nitya Suris. Of these, the bound are those who are not freed from the empirical existence, right? They're here, prisoners in this material world. They are those particular kinds of sentient beings from Brahma down to a worm, right? Who are in the shell of the cosmic sphere, which constitutes the 14 worlds. This is already discussed, right? So they're here in this material world. Brahma originated from the navel lotus of Sriman Narayana. From Brahma came Rudra. Again, from Brahma were born the yogins, beginning with Sanak. So we have those four Kumaras, Sanak, Sananda, Sanat, and Sanat Kumar, right? The heavenly sages like Narada, etc. There's different sages. The Brahmana sages like Vashishta, Bhrigu, etc. And the 9 Prajapatis, Pulastya, Marichi, Daksha, Kasyapa, etc. From these have originated the Devas, right? The other Devatas, the guardians of the quarters, right? The different Dikpalas, the directional deities, the 14 Indras, the 14 Manus, the Asuras, right? The demons, the Pitris, the forefathers, the Siddhas, the perfected beings, right? The Gandharvas, like type of angels, the Kinnaras, also type of higher being, you know, the Kimpurushas, the Vidyadharas, etc. So there's all these different types of beings, and they are created all by Brahma. The Vasus, the Rudras, right? There are 11 Rudras. The Adityas, right? There are 12 Adityas. There are 2 Ashwins, right? The Ashwini Kumaras, the 2 Ashwins. And the Danavas, the Yakshas, the Rakshasas, the Pisachas, and the Guhyakas, right? We have all these demoniac races, right? Thus, the race of Devas has been explained. So we have these. Sometimes we have this. We tell these Yakshas, Rakshas, and Pisachas and Guhyakas. There's a distinction between them, but won't go into it here, like that. But there's a mantra for before you void feces, before you pass stool, right? You say Bhutavetala Sarpadya Yaksha Rakshasa Guhyaka. So Yakshas, Rakshas, and Saguhyagas get lost, go away, because I'm about to pass through. Thus, the race of Devas has been explained. Okay, so the human beings, Madhvacharya has a book like this also, where he delineates all of it. It's called Tattva Sankhya, and he talks about all the different beings and all the different. He also talks about the dravyas and adravyas and things like that. That would be an interesting book to look at and compare. You know, how the Madhvas see it, how the Ramanujas see it, how the Sri Vaishnavas see it. The human beings are also manifold. So there's different types of human beings because of the difference in classes or castes as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, etc. Right? We've got Chandalas, Panchamas, we've got different people. Right? If you look in Manusmriti and the Smriti Shastras, there's a description of different types. Right? The animals are also multifarious because of the distinction as cattle, beasts, birds, serpents, moths, worms, etc., etc. The non-ambulance normally means the plants. So we've got the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. The non-ambulance, those that cannot walk, right, or cannot move, right, are various kinds because of the differences as trees, thickets, creepers, bushes, grasses, etc. The trees, etc., do have some relation with consciousness, which is useful for sucking up water. Right, so trees also have some consciousness. Otherwise, why would they? You know, they're not just. They have to suck up water through their roots and things. For it is to be said, amongst the non-sentients, consciousness is meager. And this is a quote from Vishnu Purana 6.7.64. There's a verse in Vishnu Purana which says that the non-sentience. It really doesn't mean non-sentience. It means the non-ambulance, the plants. The plants, right, have very meager consciousness. They're very dull consciousness. Therefore, The bound are divided into groups: human, devas, animals, and plants, non-ambulance. Again, there's this idea of how they are born, right? So this is an old idea, and we can scientifically, it's of course not correct. But if we look at, this was their idea in those days. Again, they are divided into womb-born, right, egg-born, sprout-born, right, and sweat-born. Okay. So womb-born, egg-born, sprout-born. I can go with sweat-born. Doesn't seem to be any scientific basis for that, but anyhow, this is the division given by him. When something is given and when something is explained, and we understood later by projection anumana, because we're talking about material things here, so it's empirical knowledge, right? So if some empirical knowledge is disproved, later on, then we can accept that. We can accept that it's disproved. So we don't, this theory of being sweat-born, I would say, is something which has been disproved. The womb-born, those born from the womb, are devas and human beings. Of these, Brahma, Rudra, etc., Sanaka, and the other sages, Sita, Draupadi. It's interesting they put his Sita as being an example of womb-born, because wasn't she dug up at a sacrificial arena? I don't know. Okay, Draupadi, Drishtadyumna, etc., right? Bhutas and Vaitalas. Vaitalas is a type of zombie, a type of being that inhabits dead bodies, etc. Are not born from wombs. So these Bhutas. I see. He's saying are not born from wombs. Of womb-born are devas and human beings. But of these, Brahma, Rudra, Sanaka, and other sages, Sita, Draupadi, Drishtadyumna, Bhutas, Vaitalas, etc., 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 these are not born from wombs. Okay, so there's some exceptions. Right. The animals, etc., are born of wombs, eggs, and sweat. The sprout-born are the non-ambulants. So trees and plants are born from sprouts, from seeds. By virtue of avidya, karma, tendency, hankering, and matter contact, begun from time immemorial, which in the form of an uneven stream and like the unending cycle of seed and sprout, whirl like a wheel, the bound individual selves of such description are subjected to manifold and wonderful states of womb life, birth, infancy, youth, waking, dream, sleep, unconsciousness, old age, death, attainment of heaven, hell, etc. They suffer the three kinds of unbearable afflictions, adhyatmik, adhibhautik, adhidaivic, right? It's these three types of afflictions that we get, right? Which are without beginning and of innumerable sorts, and consequently are cut off from the experience of Bhagavan Sriman Narayana, their natural acquisition. Right, so this is a description of material life. They are again of two kinds, the scripture-controlled beings and the scripture-free beings. Of these, the bound selves, whose knowledge depends on the sense organs, are controlled by scripture. Right? That knowledge does not exist in animals and non-ambulants. Right? So we have human beings and perhaps above who are dealt with in the scriptures that now that they have this intelligence or this level of consciousness, they are bound by the scriptures. Whereas animals and plants, they're not bound by the scriptures. That knowledge does not exist in animals and non-ambulants or plants. The scripture controlled are of two kinds, right? There are two kinds of people who are under the control of scripture, but whether they like it or not, there's the bhukshus, the pleasure seekers, the material pleasure seekers, of people who are looking for sense gratification, and the mumukshus, the liberation or the moksha seekers, those who are looking to get a liberation, mukti, moksha, and that moksha again is the eternal service of Sriman Narayana in Vaikuntha. Of these, the bhukshus, right, those who are pleasure seeking, are those who are in. So, for instance, we have that book, Mumukshapati. It's for those persons who are mumukshus. Maybe somebody can write a book called Bubukshapati. It will be for the people who are only interested in material sense gratification. Of these, the bubukshus are those who are intent on the three kinds of human goals: dharma, artha, and kama, religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. They are of two kinds. These people, these bubukshus, are of two kinds. They're those engrossed in artha and kama, or in making money, or in economic development and sense gratification, and those solely devoted to dharma. So there are some good people out there who are even pleasure-seeking people, right? But they are religious and they are righteous people. They're righteous people, right? They believe in dharma. Mere devotees of artha and kama are those materialists who think that the body is the self. Hedonistic people, right? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. Chavaka also says this. He says, beg, borrow, or steal, but somehow get ghee and cook good food and eat it and enjoy life, because at the end of death, he says, at the end of life comes death, and death is nothing, and the body is burned and everything is finished. That's what Charvaka says, right? So this is materialism, right? So there are those people. The devotees of Dharma are those who are intent on sacrifice, charity, austerity, pilgrimage, as indicated by the definition. Dharma is that which is the means for happiness not relating to this world, right? It's for a greater good. And dharma is that which is indicated by the Vedic injunction as a means for welfare, right? And this is the quotation. So we have, they are endowed with the knowledge that there is a future existence for the self different from the body. So those people who are interested in dharma, right? The devotees of dharma are again of two kinds. The devotees of other deities and the devotees of Bhagavan. So you have these people who are performing dharmic acts, right? Acts of karma yoga, right? And some of them are worshipping other devatas, and some of them are worshipping Sriman Narayana even. The devotees of other deities are those who worship Brahma, Rudra, Indra, Agni. The devotees of Bhagavan are those qualified persons who are spoken of as the distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of enjoyment in Bhagavad Gita 7:16. So, Arto Jigyasa Artati Gyani Cha Bharata Shaba is the statement in Bhagavad Gita. The distressed is he who longs to get back his lost fortune. The seeker of enjoyment is one who hankers for fortune not possessed before. Right? So we have the distressed, the person who had a fortune and lost it. He had some sense gratification and lost it, and he wants to get it back. You have the seeker of enjoyment, right? So you have the arto, who is distressed. The artarti, one who is seeking material sense gratification, who wants to possess it, has never possessed it before. Right? Then you have the jnani, right? Arta Jigyasa, Jigyasu and Jnani are the inquisitive and the one who's actually in knowledge. The mumukshus are of two kinds: the votaries of kaivalya, self-realization, and the votaries of moksha, release from samsara. Okay, so there are these two types of mumukshus. Some people are interested in realization of the self only. Realization of the self only, that leads to kaivalya moksha, which is isolation, liberation in isolation from the Supreme Lord, where only getting the bliss of the self is important. And then there's other people who want release from samsara. They want moksha in the sense of they want an active relationship with Sriman Narayana, serving him in Vaikuntha. What is called kaivalya is of the nature of realization of the self as distinct from prakriti. This realization is effected by jnana yoga. So he's saying here that through jnana yoga, one can reach kaivalya. They say that it is a kind of self-realization without the realization of Bhagavan. As in the case of a wife who has been deserted by her husband, experienced in some corner of the highest abode after reaching it by the path of light. So the path of light is called the Achiradi Marga. The Achiradi Marga is the the method or the path that the soul takes to go to Vaikuntha when he attains liberation. So he's saying here, so he's giving the example here that this kind of realization of Kaivalya, right, is in the case where the wife is deserted by the husband. Now, the idea is that the husband is Sriman Narayana. When the husband and wife live together, the wife serves the husband. This is a very patriarchal understanding, but it's an analogy. So we have to understand it through as an analogy. It's not insisting on patriarchy, but it's explaining what the system was. That the wife is and the jivas are conceived of as being like the wife of the Lord. We are all married to the Lord, and we serve Him like a faithful wife, like that. But in the case, so that's why it's given this idea of Kaivalya as like a wife who was without a husband. The husband left her. There's no Sriman Narayana. There's just the soul, right? The soul is the wife of Sriman Narayana, but the wife is just alone now, by herself. So that's the analogy being given, right? Deserted by her husband, experienced in some corner of the highest abode. The highest abode means Nitya Vibhuti. So some corner, in some corner of that place, it may be possible to isolate yourself from the rest of what's going on with the service to Sriman Narayana, and that is what is called Kaivalya. So according to this, and there are two concepts according to the southern school of Tengalais and the northern school of Wadagalais. The Tengalais say that Kaivalya is actually an eternal position. It's possible that you can eternally be situated in self-consciousness, in full self-consciousness, and that can be a type of liberation. It's the enjoyment involved in that is far less, but one is completely engrossed in the soul, in the Brahmanubhava, the enjoyment of the individual soul, right? It is far less than it is a shadow, let's say, of real liberation, which is actual service to Sriman Narayana, active service to Sriman Narayana. So it says here in some but the Wadagalais say that it is actually in a place. It occurs that the soul goes to some place still within this material world, inside the what is it called, the Lila Vibhuti. And it's not actually liberation, and it's not eternal. It cannot be eternal. According to Wadagalais, it cannot be eternal. According to Tengalais, it can be eternal, but it's far lesser destination than actual serving the Lord in proper moksha. Others say that since Scripture does not declare the return of those who have gone by the path of light, right? So in the Brahma Sutras, the very last sutras in the Brahma Sutras, or the Brahma Sutras are no return, no return. That's the last sutra of Brahma Sutras, or the 4 chapters of Brahma Sutras. The last sutra is no return, no return. And what it says is, therefore, that if you go by the path of light, you will not return. So here it's being said that even Kaivalyas, these mumukshus are of two kinds. There's the Kaivalyarti and there's the moksharti, right? So the Kaivalyarti, the one who's going for Kaivalya mukta, moksha, right? He goes also by the path of light. If you go by the path of light, according to the scriptures, you don't come back. So therefore, it's permanent. So here we can see an indication that the author here is tending towards the Tengalai position, right? Does not declare. So some say that since the scripture does not declare the return of those who go there by the path of light, they, that is, the votaries of Kaivalya, the Kaivalya mokshartis, right, who are said to return, right? That is the votaries of Kaivalya who are said to return, right? So they're said to return by the Wadagalais, but not by the Tengalais. Experience self-realization in some portion in the physical realm itself. Okay, so what's he saying here? Some others say, okay, so Srinivasa seems to be a follower of Vedanta Deshika and the Wadagalai idea, right? that they do come back, right? That the Kaivalyatis do come back, right? And therefore it must therefore be in this material realm itself. So there's a division on this. So he does say that some say that because they go by the path of light, they never come back. But others say, right, that there's this experience of self-realization in some part of the physical realm itself, the Lila Vibhuti. The votaries of moksha are of two kinds, right? The bhaktas, again, they divided into two different ways, right? First of all, we said that those who want moksha can be divided into those who want kaivalya and those who want actual service to Sriman Narayana moksha, right? Then we can say that there also can be divided amongst bhaktas and prapanas. So bhaktas are the lovers of God, and prapanas are those who completely resigned or surrendered themselves to God. Right? The bhaktas are those who have read the Veda together with its auxiliaries, the Vedas and Vedangas and the Upanishads, and who from the knowledge of the earlier and latter parts of the Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, give the rules for discussion or deliberation. Mimamsa means deliberation on the topics given in the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda or Upasana Kanda, right? The Upanishads and the Karma Kanda sections of the Vedas, right? Right? And for knowledge of the earlier and latter parts of the Mimamsa have determined the nature of Brahman as different from Chit and Achit. So they've understood the Supreme Lord by their study, right? And by they have understood by Purva and Uttara Mimamsa, they've understood by that deliberation, right? They've understood that Chit, the soul, and Achit, matter, is different from Brahman or the Supreme, Ishvara or Sriman Narayana, as essentially of the nature of bliss, infinite and unsurpassable, right? As opposed to all evil, and as comprising in himself all auspicious qualities. And we're going to hear about those in the next chapter, perhaps, right? When we talk about Ishvara in more detail. Having this firm knowledge, they accept bhakti with its limbs, right? Which is the means for the attainment of him, and by that bhakti conceive the desire for the attainment of release. The qualification for the path of bhakti belongs to the members of the three varnas only. This is where we get this idea that bhakti yoga cannot be performed by the lady. Well, he didn't say there was a gender disqualification, but basically by the Trivarnikas, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas only. So it's a caste-based distinction, right? The Devas and the like also are qualified for bhakti on account of the possibility of supplication and capability in them, right? So we don't necessarily classify the devatas, right, the spiritual beings, as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, but they also can do bhakti, right? Whereas those who are not Brahmins, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas, and they're human beings, here it's saying they're not qualified for bhakti, for this path of bhakti yoga. The Sudras are not qualified, since such qualification is contrary to the teachings of the Adhikarana of non-Sudras. So we have to look at this. We have to look in the Brahma Sutras, especially the Sri Bhashya, and we have to understand that there is an Adhikarana. Adhikarana means a section, a specific discussion, topic. Let's say Adhikarana is a topic in the Brahma Sutras which deals with the difference between Sudras and non-Sudras. So he just simply says that because of this. The essential nature of bhakti has already been explained in the chapter on Buddhi, Dharma, Bhuti, Jnana. The bhaktas are of two kinds. Okay, so now we're talking about bhakti yogis. The bhakti yogins, which are the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, okay, are of two kinds, as those who are established in bhakti, which is of the nature of the means, and those who are established in bhakti, which is an end in itself. So there are those persons who perform bhakti yoga as a means to liberation, and those persons who perform bhakti or devotion as an end in itself. Vyasa and others were established in bhakti, which is the nature of means. So Vyasa and other sages, they do bhakti, right? They do it for as a means to liberation. Sri Parankusha. Parankusha means, again, Namalwar. So we have Vyasa and the sages like Narada, Sitala, Deva, these people. Devala, okay. These people do bhakti as a process to liberation. Sri Parankusha, Namalwar, and others, meaning the other Alwars and the Acharyas of Sri Vaishnavism, were established in bhakti as an end in itself. So these people, because they're prapanas, right? They're simply surrendered to the Lord like that, but they still do bhakti, right? They do acts of bhakti, right? In bhakti as an end in itself. It's really interesting here. I would suggest what is very interesting here is that they've mentioned Parankusha. Sometimes people get into this idea about the castes of the Alwars. Okay, in fact, there were 7 Alwars who were of Trivarnika caste, right? High caste. And there were other Alwars like Tirupan, Tondaradipodi, I believe Tondaradipodi and Tirupan, not sure, Tondaradipodi, Tirupan, Tirumalasai were all considered to be non-Dvijas or non-Trivarnikas. Okay. I'm not sure about Namalwar. Namalwar also, some people say Namalwar was not of a Brahmin caste or a high caste. Okay, so the thing is, if Parankusha and some of these other Alwars were not of the Trivarnika castes, then how come he's saying that they can do a type of bhakti? Because the bhakti yogis are supposed to be only the persons qualified for bhakti. What does he say here? Bhakti. Those qualified for bhakti, right? So it's not actually that they're qualified for bhakti. They're qualified for bhakti yoga, using bhakti as a means to liberation. The three varnas, the Trivarnikas. But even Shudras, obviously here, even non-Brahmins, right, are qualified for bhakti in the sense of just simply doing it without a purpose for liberation, but doing it as an end in itself. The prapana is he who, being characterized by the attributes of being helpless and devoid of any other refuge, right, of another refuge, resorts to Bhagavan Sriman Narayana. He is also of 2 kinds, as one who is intent on the 3 ends of life, and one who is intent on release, the 4th end, right? So there's some people who say, yes, okay, I'm surrendered to the Lord, but I'm still going to live in this material world, right? That's artha prapatti. And then we have dripta prapatti, where somebody wants to, it's rarer, somebody simply wants liberation immediately and can't bear, and he wants immediately to go, to be released and to immediately go to the feet of the Lord. He doesn't care about this material world in any way, shape, or form. The devotee of the 3 ends is he who appeals to Bhagavan Sriman Narayana alone for dharma, artha, and kama. The devotee of release, possessing the discrimination of what is eternal and what is non-eternal by means of holy company, right, of sadhu sangha, becomes dispassionate on account of his disgust for the transmigratory existence. Consequently, the desire for release arises in his mind, and to attain that goal, he takes recourse to a spiritual preceptor who is distinguished by the characteristics of an ideal teacher, such as stated in the text. And he gives a quote: the teacher is he who is well versed in the Veda, etc. And through the instrumentality of that teacher, he resorts to the Divine Mother, Shri Mahalakshmi, right, Paripuriti, right, who is the mediator between him and the Lord. Then, being unable to follow other paths such as bhakti, etc., bhakti yoga it means, and therefore feeling helpless and refugeless, he takes shelter at the feet of Sriman Narayana as the only means. He who is of this description is called the prapana. Everyone, irrespective of caste or profession, you can say gender, I would say even sexual orientation, whatever it is, irrespective of differences, material differences, Everyone, every sentient being, animal, plant, human being, deva, whatever, is qualified for self-surrender, is qualified for the system of property or sharanagati. The prapana, again, is of two kinds. As ekantin, one-pointed, and paramakantin, which is the extremely one-pointed. So the prapana is one-pointed for service to God. But there's another prapana who's extremely one-pointed. The ekantin is he who seeks Bhagavan alone for liberation, along with other worldly fruits. The meaning is that to him, other gods are simply non-existent, right? He is Paramakantin, who does not desire any other fruits even from Bhagavan, himself, except devotion and knowledge, right? So there's these two prapanas. He is again of two kinds. The Paramakantin is again of two kinds, right? Because of the difference between dripta is patience, and arta impatience. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. So dripta means patient aspirant, and the arta means impatient aspirant. So the dripta is patient, and the arta is impatient. Dripta is he who experiences the fruits of his previous deeds, means he lives his life, as expressed in the saying, necessarily it must be experienced, and waits patiently for the casting off of this body for the attainment of release. The arta is he who conceives the longing for release immediately after the act of self-surrender. As soon as he does his surrender through the agency of the Guru and Sri Devi Mahalakshmi, right? Immediately he does that. He after the act of self-surrender, he has this longing for release, since he feels the state of transmigratory existence here in this world as extremely unbearable, like one who is enveloped by blazing flames. He feels so badly that he's here. He so much wants to go to liberation and perform the service of the Lord. The liberated is one who, after accepting property as the means, performs all nitya and naimittika, regular and incidental religious duties as ends in themselves, since he regards them as consecrated service enjoined by Bhagavan. In the scriptures, the Lord has given all these things to be done. Who refrains from committing offenses against Bhagavan, and the votaries of Bhagavan, the other devotees, the other persons, the other prapanas who are surrendered to Bhagavan, who at the moment of giving up the body commits his merits and demerits to his friends and foes respectively. This is an idea of Vedanta Deshikas, that and the northern school of Vadagalai Sri Vaishnavas, that at the end of life, the merits or the punya of a person that are not used up in his life because at the end of life, a prapana will go to Sri Vaikuntham. He can't take those things with him. So therefore, those merits, those punyas will go to his friends, and those papas will go to his enemies. I'm not a great fan of this idea of this thing. We can discuss it in detail. But anyway, it's an idea. Who then, after reposing in Paramatman, abiding in the heart, as described in the text, the wise should merge the speech into the mind, etc., from Kathopanishad 3:13, enters the artery called the Shushumna, right? This idea of the nerve, the Shushumna nerve, Nadi, right? The gateway for release, and issues out of the body through the aperture of the crown of the head, the Brahmarandra, who then, together with the Antaryamin, right? The soul leaves the body together with the Paramatma, the Antaryamin, abiding within the heart, and reaches the world of Agni through the rays of the sun, who then is hospitably received on the way by the presiding deities of the day, the first half of the lunar month, the Shukla Paksha, right? The Shukla Paksha, yeah, I guess. Or is it we'll have to see what the first half of the lunar month. That's interesting because there's different types of lunar month. The summer solstice, the year, and also by Vayu. Right. Who then pierces the orb of the sun, and through the opening of the ether reaches the world of the sun, who thereafter being conducted with great marks of hospitality by the Ativahika guides, that when the body is burned in the cremation, the soul, along with this subtle body, this Ativahika body, right? So here we have Ativahika guides. We have these subtle guides, right? Which we should understand to be in the scripture they're called the Vishnu Dutas, right? The right, such as the moon, lightning, Varuna, Indra, Prajapati, etc. This idea is all given. This Acharadi Marga, this path to Vaikuntha, is all described in the Upanishads. And through their respective worlds, who then, having crossed the river Viraja, taking bath in the Viraja river, and luffing off this material body and mind and everything like that, even the Ativahika, the subtle version, right? Defining the boundary line between Prakriti and Vaikuntha, that's the boundary line, the Viraja, shakes off the subtle body, who then, by the touch of the Amanava, a non-human person, assumes a non-material divine form with 4 arms, is adorned with Brahmic decorations, who then, with the permission of the city gatekeepers, named Indra and Prajapati, enters the divine city known as Sri Vaikuntha, who, after entering a towered gate, having tall ramparts and decorated with banners, bearing the ensigns of Garuda and Ananta on these flags, right, on these ensigns, beholds the lake of nectar named Iramada, and the Ashvata tree, the banyan tree known as Somasavana, who then is received by 500 nymphs in a group of hundreds, right? As described in the text, 100 with garlands in their hands, and is adorned with Brahmic perfume, etc., who then, having offered his obeisance to the residents of that place, such as Ananta, Garuda, and Vishvaksena, which is what we do in Tiravaradam in puja every day, we say. We say Kurmadin Divyalokan, Tanumanimayam, Mandapam, Tatrashesham, Tatsmin, Dharmadi Pitam, Taruparikamalam, Chamara, Grahinischa, Vishnum Devi, Bushaidamuragam, Parukes Vainateyam, Senesham, Dwarapalan, Kumanamukaganam, Vishnu Bhaktam, Papadye, right? And being greeted by them in turn approaches the hall known as the Maha Mani Mandapa, right? That 1,000-pillared hall, right? The Maha, the great jewel, Mani Mandapa hall, and offers his obeisance to his spiritual teacher near the couch, right? So where the Lord is sitting, he first offers his obeisance to his guru, who goes up to the couch and beholds, together with his divine consorts, right? Shri, Bhu, and Neela, Bhagawan, Sriman Narayana, seated on Ananta, who is upon the lotus, and which again is on the throne, made of dharma, adharma, jnana, agyana, vairagya, avairagya. This is the nature of the throne, right? Which is what we do in Pita Puja, right? Served by Vimala and others, these lady Chamaradaris, the ladies with the chamaras, 9 of them, and others with chowries in their hands, endowed with divine weapons of conch and discus, right? Shankachakra, adorned with the innumerable divine ornaments such as the shining crown, kirita, fish-shaped earrings, makara kundala, Graiveyahara, another type of garland, right, or necklace, Keyura, Kataka, Srivatsa, Kustuba, the Kustuba, Mukta Damodara Bhanda, right, Pitambara, the yellow cloth, Kanchi Guna, Nupura, and on his all of these different ornaments, right, and toe rings and anklets and everything. And the ocean of auspicious attributes which are boundless and generous, who then salutes the lotus feet of Bhagawan with his head, ascends the couch, and then gets on the couch there, and is received unto the very lap of Sriman Narayana, Bhagavan, who, when questioned, who art thou? Replies, God is going to ask you, who art thou? I am a mode of Brahman, right? I am your attribute. I am your servant. I am yours. Who then is blessed by the glances of Bhagavan Sriman Narayana, who by virtue of that excellent bliss engendered by the communion with Bhagavan, solely becomes devoted to the diverse services of Bhagavan Sriman Narayana, situated in all places, all times, and all states, in whom then the eightfold qualities become manifest, eightfold good qualities, auspicious qualities, and who becomes established in the communion with Bhagavan Sriman Narayana, which is devoid of any subsequent limit. Such a person is said to be liberated. That's what liberation is. The statement of the scripture that the liberated individual self attains equality with Brahman means that it has equality with Brahman in the enjoyment or bliss only. For it has been declared in the Vedanta Sutras that the power of the released self is devoid of cosmic functions like creation, destruction, right? Giving of liberation. These are not things, powers that are there in the individual soul, right? Even the released soul. He has the enjoyment and he has the knowledge in full, in complete bliss and complete ananda. Complete ananda, complete bliss, and complete chit, complete knowledge. He can assume multifold forms and wander all over the world. Now, how the individual self can wander in this world, since it has been declared that the liberated does not return, right? So we just said that the liberated soul can also wander all over the world, even this material world, right? But yet, in the scriptures, it is said, no return, no return. So how is that? What is the answer to that? This need not be doubted, since the return due to karma is said not to occur. This return of nityasuris or muktas who can come back to this material world, which they can, right? But it is not due to karma that they come. It is when it says no return in Vedanta Sutra, it means no return because of karma. The roaming according to one's own will becomes possible. But of course, one's will is dependent upon the Satya Sankalpa, the divine will of Sriman Narayana. So only by his will would one do that. So therefore, the liberated individual self by his own will, which is in harmony with that of Bhagavan, with the will of Bhagavan, with his Satya Sankalpa, Sriman Narayana's eternal divine will, can roam everywhere. The eternals are Ananta, Garuda, Vishvaksena, etc., whose consciousness is devoid of contraction, inasmuch as their activities are never opposed to the will of Bhagavan. Their special duties have been fixed up from time without beginning, time immemorial, by the eternal will of Ishvara, or Sriman Narayana. The incarnations of those eternals, like Garuda, Ananta, Vishvaksena, etc., those nityasuris, right, are determined by their own will, like the incarnation of Bhagavan. Thus, the individual self, which is divided into three groups as the bound, the liberated, and the eternal, has been explained. Thus ends the 8th avatara or chapter on the jiva, right, of Yatindramata Dipika, composed by Srinivasa, the foremost disciple of Sriman Mahacharya, the ornament of the line of Sri Vadulas. And the next one is about Ishvara, about God. So I think we'll leave it there today. So there were a lot of things which I went through very quickly, which I didn't explain in detail, and we would have to look at the notes. We would have to go into much depth about it. But basically, remember that this book is just laying out. It's laying out what is there in the system of Ramanuja, all the different things, and giving definitions of them. The definitions themselves have not been gone into in extreme detail. Where they're understandable, we understand them. Where they're not understandable, we would have to go back and go into extreme detail on them. So that's possible. We can do that. But since we want to get through the book and we want to get to more extensive ideas, we've done it in this way.